The potential acquisition of U.S. Steel by Japan's Nippon Steel is making headlines.
It's unusual for a deal of this magnitude to be so heavily influenced by the White House.
It's not just any business deal. It's a story where President Biden has the final say.
The president's involvement definitely adds another layer of complexity to this situation.
Tell me more about why this deal is raising such significant national security concerns.
Well, the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, or CFIUS as it's known, is responsible for reviewing foreign investments for any potential national security risks.
So CFIUS is the gatekeeper, making sure that foreign investments don't jeopardize national security.
They couldn't agree on whether this deal posed a threat, so it went to the president.
So the president ultimately decides whether this deal goes through or not. What are the specific concerns?
The main concern is about the potential decline in U.S. steel production if a foreign company takes control.
Steel is essential for so many things: infrastructure, defense, manufacturing. It's a strategic material.
The administration is worried about maintaining a strong domestic steel industry.
For both economic and strategic reasons.
Exactly. They fear that if U.S. steel production declines, the U.S. could become more reliant on foreign steel.
Which could be a problem in times of crisis.
President Biden has been very clear about his stance on this.
He wants to keep U.S. Steel under American ownership and operation.
He's made that very clear.
But Nippon Steel and U.S. Steel are arguing that this deal won't harm American interests at all.
They've tried to address those national security concerns by highlighting the economic benefits.
So it's a bit of a tug of war between national security concerns and potential economic gains.
Nippon Steel has made some promises. They've said they'll invest heavily in U.S. Steel's facilities, potentially modernizing them.
So they're saying they'll actually make U.S. Steel stronger.
They've also promised to appoint U.S. citizens to key leadership positions.
So they're trying to reassure the government that this acquisition would be good for U.S. Steel.
And for American jobs. They argue that their investment is necessary for U.S. Steel to compete.
Compete against cheaper foreign steel, particularly from China.
That's right. The U.S. steel industry has been struggling to compete with China for years.
I understand the economic arguments, but the United Steelworkers Union isn't convinced.
The union's opposition really highlights the human side of this story.
They're worried about their members.
Their concerns are about job security, potential changes to their benefits, and the impact on the entire U.S. steel supply chain.
The union represents the workers who would be most directly affected by this deal.
They see this acquisition as a threat.
A threat to their livelihoods, their communities, and the future of the U.S. steel industry.
And then we have Cleveland-Cliffs, another U.S. steelmaker, entering the scene.
They're opposed to the deal, too.
They actually made a bid to acquire U.S. Steel themselves, but Nippon Steel outbid them.
So their opposition adds a whole other layer of complexity to this already intricate situation.
It's not just national security and economics at play here, but also competition within the industry.
We've got the companies pursuing the deal, the union trying to protect its workers, and a rival company with its own agenda.
And at the center of it all is the president, and he has a tough decision to make.
If he blocks the deal, what happens then?
Both Nippon Steel and U.S. Steel have threatened to take legal action.
Legal action against the U.S. government. On what grounds?
They're claiming that blocking the deal would be a violation of due process.
They're saying the White House is interfering in a private business transaction.
They've also hinted that the president's opposition might be politically motivated.
Politically motivated? In what way?
There's speculation that his stance is influenced by a potential agreement with the United Steelworkers Union.
To secure their support for his re-election campaign.
Exactly. Those are just allegations at this point.
But they raise questions about whether the president is putting politics ahead of national security and economic interests.
It's a complicated situation with a lot of moving parts.
President Biden has to weigh the national security implications, the economic benefits, and the political ramifications of his decision.
And whatever he decides, it's going to have major consequences, not just for U.S. Steel, but for the entire U.S. steel industry and even international relations.
It's a decision with global implications.
It's going to be fascinating to see how this all plays out. The steel industry is a cornerstone of any modern economy.
It's the backbone of infrastructure, manufacturing, and even defense.
Having a strong domestic steel industry is crucial for national security and economic competitiveness.
The U.S. has always been a major player in the steel industry.
Historically, yes, but in recent decades, the industry has faced significant headwinds,
leading to a decline in U.S. steel production.
Globalization has been a major factor. The rise of cheaper foreign steel, especially from China, has put a lot of pressure on U.S. steelmakers.
It's been tough for American companies to compete on price.
And that's led to plant closures, job losses, and a shrinking market share for U.S. steel.
This deal, the potential acquisition of U.S. Steel by Nippon Steel has really brought those challenges into focus.
It sparked a debate about the future of American manufacturing and the role of foreign investment in strategic industries.
Some people argue that the president's opposition to this deal is more about politics than economics or national security.
There's speculation that he's trying to appeal to his base and secure union support for the upcoming election.
But others say his concerns about national security are genuine.
It's hard to know for sure what's motivating his stance, but the political context is definitely adding another layer of complexity to this situation.
And then there's the United Steelworkers Union. They're adamantly opposed to this deal.
The union is fighting hard to protect its members' jobs and benefits.
They're worried about what this acquisition would mean for the livelihoods of thousands of steelworkers.
They're concerned about job security, potential changes to their benefits, and the overall impact on the U.S. steel supply chain.
They see this deal as a threat to the entire American steel industry.
Their involvement has definitely turned up the heat on President Biden to make a decision that aligns with their interests.
The union represents a significant voting bloc. Their endorsement carries a lot of weight, especially in an election year.
This whole situation really highlights the power of organized labor.
It's a reminder that economic decisions have a human impact.
Behind all the talk of national security and global markets, there are real people whose lives are affected by these decisions.
The union is giving a voice to those people, to the workers who are on the front lines of this issue.
Their perspective reminds us that we can't just focus on abstract economic principles. We have to consider the human cost as well.
The union's involvement has added a layer of urgency and a moral weight to this debate.
They've made it clear that this isn't just about profits and balance sheets, it's about people's lives and livelihoods.
This situation also raises questions about the role of government.
What's the right balance between attracting foreign investment and protecting domestic industries?
Foreign investment can bring in much-needed capital and expertise. It can help revitalize struggling industries.
But there's also a risk that foreign companies could gain too much control over strategically important sectors.
It's a delicate balancing act.
This case has really exposed the tensions between those competing priorities.
And then there's the legal aspect. If President Biden blocks this deal, Nippon Steel and U.S. Steel could sue the government.
They're arguing that blocking the deal would be a violation of their due process rights.
It raises questions about the limits of presidential power.
How much authority does the president have to intervene in private business transactions, even if national security is a concern?
The possibility of a legal challenge adds another layer of complexity to this already complicated situation.
It's a reminder that even in a globalized economy, national sovereignty still matters.
This whole debate has really brought to the forefront the challenges of globalization.
We're living in an interconnected world where capital flows freely across borders, but that creates new challenges for governments.
How do you balance the benefits of global trade with the need to protect your own national interests?
How do you ensure that the gains from globalization are shared fairly among all segments of society?
This situation is forcing us to grapple with those questions.
The potential acquisition of U.S. Steel by Nippon Steel is a microcosm of those larger global trends.
It's a case study in the complexities of globalization, national security, and the role of government in the 21st century.
The decisions made in this case will have ripple effects far beyond the steel industry.
They will shape the future of American manufacturing, international trade, and the relationship between the U.S. and its allies.
It's a reminder that we're living in an increasingly interconnected world, and the choices we make today will have consequences for years to come.
President Biden is in a tough spot.
It's a real dilemma. There are no easy answers here.
If he blocks this deal, it could damage relations with Japan.
Japan is a key ally in the region. We don't want to jeopardize that relationship.
And there's the potential for lengthy legal battles. Those could drag on for years.
But if he approves the acquisition, it could send the wrong message.
That the U.S. is willing to put foreign investment ahead of its own workers.
And ahead of national security concerns. It's a tough balancing act.
He has to weigh the economic benefits against the potential risks, both in the short term and the long term.
And he has to do all of this while navigating a complex political landscape.
This decision has implications that go way beyond U.S. Steel. It could set a precedent for future foreign investments in American companies.
Especially in industries that are considered critical to national security.
The world is watching to see what he decides.
His decision will send a signal about America's stance on foreign investment, on globalization, and on the role of government in protecting strategic industries.
What do you think is the most important factor for President Biden to consider as he makes this decision?
I think he needs to focus on the long-term economic and strategic interests of the United States.
What does that mean in practice?
He needs to carefully evaluate the potential impact on the U.S. steel industry.
Will this deal strengthen or weaken American steel production?
He needs to think about the stability of the steel supply chain. Can we rely on foreign sources of steel, or do we need to maintain a strong domestic industry?
And of course, there's the national security angle.
Does this acquisition pose any risks to our national security?
Those are tough questions. There are no simple answers.
But I think it's essential for the president to make a decision based on a clear-eyed assessment of those factors.
A decision that puts the interests of the United States first.
Politics and diplomacy are important, of course, but they shouldn't overshadow the fundamental goal of protecting America's economic and strategic well-being.
This whole situation has been a fascinating case study in the challenges of globalization.
It's shown us how interconnected our world is and how complex these issues have become.
We've seen the tensions between free trade and national security, between economic growth and job protection.
We've seen the power of organized labor and the influence of political considerations.
And we've seen how one decision made by one person can have ripple effects that are felt around the world.
It's been a reminder that we live in a complicated world, and the choices we make today will have consequences for years to come.
Thank you for sharing your insights with us today. It's been a fascinating discussion.
It's been a pleasure.
And to all of you listening, thank you for joining us. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a topic that's shaping our world.
Goodbye.